Hi Jay, I've got a beautiful little painting going on here. I wanted to use it to show you a couple of things because it's such a great example of the concept of using planes as your painting and what that means in terms of your of your distance and your realism and creating those different areas in your painting. So what I mean by planes is if you think about when you're looking at an image like this, there are things that are very far away and things that are a little closer and things that are closer too. And think of each of those as kind of being on its own plane. So for example, in this image, you have this back plane, which is these far mountains. That's one plane. Of course, you have the sky. That's another plane. And then you've got this ridge of mountains here, and that's halfway, it's part way in between these distant mountains and this close-up. So that's like another plane that you're dealing with. And then you have these cactuses and the foreground, and that's a third plane. Obviously, this all gradually goes back, recedes into the distance, but it's sometimes easier just to think of it in terms of individual planes coming forward. And what that means is on each plane, you're going to have different colors because of the atmospheric perspective, because of how much air you're looking through. So the colors are going to be different, your sizes are going to be different, and the chroma of your paint is going to be different. In other words, how vivid the colors are, and also what color they are. So you're going to have the more bluer, neutral colors in the background, and then gradually coming into the foreground where you have the richer and more saturated colors. You also have edges. So in the far back plane, everything's going to be very blended and soft, and then you move forward into this center plane here, and things will be a little less blended, have a little more edges to them. And then you move into the foreground, and that's where you're going to see the most detail and the most edges, because that's just the way we see, right? We can't see things that are far in the distance. They're kind of blurry. So the first thing that I want to show you here is you've basically got these colors here. Let me sample these colors for you. So these colors that you have in the background, let's get this out of the way. These colors you have in your background, you see, are these sort of neutralized purples in a mid-range, okay? And now if I come up here into the foreground colors, you've got some purples up here, and they're just about the same. They're just as grayed down, if you see what I mean. So you see how they're in this very grayed, neutralized is another word to put it, area, as opposed to being over here where the colors are richer and more saturated. So when I look at the colors here in the photo, you see how saturated those colors are um, even in the blues. See, these blues in the lupin here are over here. Yours were clear over here into the very neutral area. So you, as opposed to, okay, so here's the colors back here in the mountains, and they too are much bluer. All of these colors are some variation of a blue color versus your warmer colors that you've got going on here. There's some more blues, but you've got yours, and you have yours very neutralized. And that's fine back here in the back. I'll often push my back mountains towards a purpley color versus a blue color like they are here. But see here you can see the difference between the bluer mountains. They're both gray, but one's warmer, yours is warmer, and the one in the photo was cooler. What that does do is give you a little more, the mountains kind of fit back here better in the blue sky, whereas you have more of a contrast of color here. But that's not so much what I'm wanting to show you. Those can stay neutral back there. It's when you get up into these colors and you start getting into this range. So it's a range of mountains now let me get rid of this for a second. It's a range that is up here. Let's pick a color that we can see. Okay. You see this range here of mountains needs to be different in value, in color, in chroma, how saturated it is, and how much detail you have. How dark the darks are. You see up in this area how these darks are significantly darker than the darks that you're going to find down here. Do you see how these darks are clearer up here on the scale and the darks in here are much further down on the scale? They're darker. So as you come forward, your darks are going to get darker. You see more of a contrast between the lightest lights here that we can find. Let's see if we can pick them up, and the darkest darks. So that's something to think about. You do have warmer colors in here, and that's fine. I'm not so much concerned about the hue, the color you're going to, as much as I'm concerned about getting that differentiation between the far distance and here. And even though you've got some warmer colors here, you've also got these very same colors as you've got back here, the same chroma, the same saturation. They're just as neutralized here as they are back here, versus, you can distinctly see the difference here, and that separates that area from the foreground and from the background. Same thing with these. You see you have these very neutralized colors in here, versus here's a green you've got in the photo. You see how vivid these greens are in here versus the greens that you've got going on here, which are much more neutralized. And they're about as neutral as the colors that you've got going on back here. See, they're in this same range between chromatic to gray. They're in that same value range. When you would want to see them more over here when you come up into the foreground. Does that make sense to you? And I think that's why you're struggling with the color, because the color is just too neutralized. Even when you look at the yellow that you've got going on here versus the yellows in the photo. And so what that means is you want to be sure to use as vivid as a color as you can, so as close to straight out of the tube as you can. And with yellows, sometimes they're kind of transparent when they're straight out of the tube. So what that means is, if you add white, they're going to get less transparent and they're going to get lighter, but they're also going to get more neutral. So sometimes it means coming back over with 2 or 3 layers if you want to get those really vivid yellows in there. It also helps to lay down your darker value, like these more orangey colors, and then bring those yellows back in on top of them. The purple too, you were saying you were using ultramarine blue, I think. Oh, for the greens, you said you were using ultramarine blue. As far as getting a more vivid chromatic color and mixing it, you'll probably have more luck with a phthalo blue versus an ultramarine blue. Ultramarine gets a little more neutral as you start mixing it with other colors, whereas if you use phthalo blue, it's a very vivid chromatic color. So you use very little of it, but it will give you those brighter colors. As far as a yellow, the best you can do is use a yellow straight out of the tube. I like Hansa Yellow Medium. It's a warmer yellow, but you can use Hansa Yellow Light as well. So, for example, let me get rid of this line for a minute and show you. I have a little tool on here I can use, and I can just saturate this whole foreground. And you see how by just using those more vivid colors, now all of a sudden that foreground is popping more than it was. And if I just do one pass over here to make those a little more vivid. You know, you really need to get those darks in there, so you're going to want to come up with something a little bit darker in this midground to pop in just touches of those darks in there. And you see how just putting in those darks brings that area forward. Of course, you would do this in a much more painterly way, but just to show you, just adding those darks then sets that apart from this background area. If I take some of that light, let's get me a little bit bigger and wash it in here, then you're going to get that set apart. This plane from the background plane by doing that. I can, anyway, I don't want to fuss with this, but you get the idea of just having some more darks in that area and having your colors in the front more saturated. It also saturated this one. Now, talking about composition, I would say for me, there's a couple of things going on. With this group of cactuses is a little confusing because it's actually down over a little hill, it looks like to me, maybe. Maybe this is kind of a hill and it drops back down and then comes back up, which is always a little confusing in a painting to get that. It's also, well, you've got this one little thing where you've got the edge of that cactus right at the edge of the mountain, which is something you just want to try to avoid. But they're also the same height across here, and they're kind of in a two. Well, they're very much in a two. I don't know, for me, I think I would, see if this will work. I think I would get rid of it entirely and not use this cactus here. That gives, you know, a little more, I think, interest to being able to see this background here a little more. You know, I would probably come in with and make that a little more distinct and get your forms in here and your shapes that you've got going on. Let's take something a little darker for the fun of it. Let's see what we can do. Because here's your thing here, and here's your shapes and whatnot. You know, you'd probably put some greens in there, slightly bluer and more, slightly bluer and more neutral, and slightly bluer and more neutral than you have in the foreground. So I would probably go a little bluer, a little more neutral, a little lighter, because this is a different plane that you're working on. And then you could put some of those, maybe some of that green that you see back in here, maybe some of that green on there. But you want it to be different. So you want the greens that you're using back here to be different than the greens you're using in this plane and then this plane. You see what I mean? So you're going to vary those up a little bit. Maybe give something a little more blue. Anyway, I don't want to repaint this. I just want you to see the difference between those, that kind of idea of the darks and the chroma. So each plane is going to have different colors and different values and different saturations, and that creates those separations. So yeah, for me, I would take that out. I would probably give a little bit more importance to this one cactus just by making it a little bigger and adding a little more detail to it. Make it a little bit more of a center of attention. You know, get a few more of your little arms going up. You've got these arms going up. Maybe make this one a little thicker. Some going back there. And then get your light that you've got going on the side of them. Remember, the direction of the light is important. It's kind of up on the top and along the side. here as if the light's coming pretty high in the sky, but from this side as well. Anyway, like I say, I don't want to repaint this for you, but that would just be my concept. I would get rid of this area, make this a little more interesting, maybe even play up these guys some, make these a little bigger. You know, you could put a small one over here like that, but I don't think I would have those two almost the same size, almost the same configuration. Now I'm just being messy, but I just want to give you an idea. If you had something over here, something over there, then a little more, I don't know, that's just what I do. So plains, I would actually, if I were doing this, I would go more blue in here. I'm just going to wash a little bit of a light blue over this in a real, just so you could see what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's too purple. Let's go. There we go. Okay. I would just, this again is messy, but something like that where bluer, warmer. So you got the three planes, 1, 2, 3, and you've got a composition that isn't so kind of symmetrical, and it's in more interesting sizes and shapes, and then all the focus being up here on your flowers. And you did a great job with those flowers. Like I say, it was just about the saturation to me. You did a great job, you know, changing up your sizes. You were talking about how it was hard to get the distant flowers, and you did perfectly. You make them smaller, you make them more smeary and more blended, and then you can get that feeling that they're disappearing into the distance like that. Yeah, so planes, saturation, changing up your color, your value, your edges in each plane as you come forward. And you know, don't use that same dark in the very far mountain as you use in the very front mountain, and don't use the same colors. Each plane is going to have its own colors, so that's important. Not to use that same purple in the front as you do in the back. Just wanted to put back in some of these darks. I lost them because that's an important concept. The darks in this area being darker than the ones back here, but lighter than the ones up here. Okay, well, anyway, I hope that's helpful, Jay, and thanks for sharing your lovely painting. Talk to you soon. One more thing before you go, I forgot to show you the before and after so you could get the comparison, just to see the differences. So here is your painting the way it was, and then here's with those changes. And I've added a few more white lights up in here, and sort of detailed out the cactuses a little bit more, but hopefully that helps you visualize the difference that those things make. See how that has a sense of being kind of flat and all one plane, and then when you add the differences you get more of a sense of a transition. Okay, just wanted to show you that before and after. Okay, talk to you later.